Somewhere in the mountains between Russia and Georgia, there is a crack in the earth that swallows rope faster than anyone can measure it. Cavers have followed it down for over 2 kilometers, straight into the bones of the planet, and they still have not found the bottom of what it's connected to. This is not a hole. It's a wound in the crust of the earth, over 2,200 meters deep, colder than a refrigerator, wetter than a swamp, and darker than anything the human eye was built to survive. And inside it, scientists found something alive, something with no eyes, no color, no reason by any normal rule of biology to exist that far from the sun. This is the story of Veryovkina Cave, the deepest place humans have ever physically entered on land, and how it quietly rewrote what we thought we knew about life, about exploration, and about how much of our own planet remains completely unmapped. Before we go down into the dark, do me a quick favor. Hit subscribe right now, because this channel goes to the places most documentaries won't follow: the bottom of oceans, the edge of space, the inside of mountains. And if that sounds like your kind of rabbit hole, you're going to want to be here for what's coming next. All right, let's descend. To understand why this cave matters, you have to understand where it is. Tucked into the western Caucasus Mountains sits a limestone plateau called the Veryovkina Massif. On the surface, it looks like nothing special. Rocky highlands, alpine grass, a few scattered sinkholes that most hikers would walk straight past without a second glance. But underneath that quiet mountain skin is one of the most extreme vertical cave systems ever discovered on the planet. For over 2 decades, this single patch of limestone has produced not one, but 2 different holders of the title, deepest cave on Earth. First, it was Caucasus Cave, sometimes called Veryovkina Cave, meaning Raven's Cave, after the birds that nest near its entrance. Then, just a few kilometers away, cavers found something even deeper, Veryovkina Cave. Same mountain, same rock, 2 different mouths into what appears to be an entire underground mountain range, except inverted, running down instead of up. Caucasus Cave made history first. In 2001, a Ukrainian caving team called CavX pushed past the 2,000-meter mark, becoming the first explorers in recorded history to descend that deep into solid rock on land. Think about that for a second. Humans reached orbit before most cavers reached the bottom of Caucasus. We had satellites circling the planet before we had fully mapped what was underneath our own feet. Caucasus held the world depth record for years, earning the nickname the Everest of Caves in the caving community, a name that stuck because reaching its lowest point required something eerily similar to summiting the world's tallest mountain, except in reverse, and with water instead of ice trying to kill you. Then, in 2018, a Russian expedition team known as Perovo made it official. Veryovkina Cave, sitting quietly in the same massif, was confirmed to plunge 2,212 meters straight down into the earth. That's over 7,200 feet. For comparison, that is deeper than 4 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, except instead of climbing up through open air, you are descending through cracks barely wide enough for a human body in total darkness and near freezing water, with no sunlight, no signal, and no quick way out if something goes wrong. Before either of these caves became famous, this entire region was basically a blank spot on the map for cave science. Soviet-era explorers first pushed into the Veryovkina Massif back in the 1980s, drawn by the sheer number of sinkholes scattered across the plateau, each one a potential doorway straight down into the mountain. Back then, nobody involved had any idea they were standing above what would eventually become the deepest known cave system on the entire planet. Progress was slow and dangerous, mostly known only within a small circle of Soviet speleologists. It took the collapse of the Soviet Union and a new generation of Ukrainian and Russian cavers with better rope technique and better gear for the true scale of what was hiding underneath that mountain to finally start coming into focus. Here's the detail almost nobody outside the caving world knows. Getting to the bottom of a cave like this is not a day trip. It is not even a weekend trip. Full expeditions into Veryovkina or Krubera can take several weeks. Teams don't just walk in and climb back out. They establish underground base camps at different depths inside the cave itself, the same way mountaineers set up camps on the way up Everest, except here, the camps are set up on the way down into the planet. Supplies, food, sleeping gear, and communication equipment all have to be hauled through narrow vertical shafts and squeezed through passages sometimes barely wide enough to fit a human torso. A single return trip from the deepest known point back up to the surface can take 3 to 4 continuous days of climbing, rappelling, and crawling. Cavers sleep underground in total blackness, wake up underground, eat underground, and do it again the next day, all while carrying rope, oxygen, and rescue gear that most people will never see in their lifetime. And the environment inside doesn't care how prepared you are. The temperature inside these deep cave systems sits at a nearly constant 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. That's about 39 to 43 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It does not matter if it's summer or the dead of winter on the surface above. Down there, it is always the same cold, damp, unmoving air. No seasons, no sunrise, no sunset. Just an endless, freezing, wet twilight that never changes day after day, week after week, for as long as the expedition lasts. Now, here's where this story stops being just an extreme sports story and becomes a genuine scientific discovery. In 2010, researchers working in Krubera Cave found something that should not have been possible according to everything biologists thought they understood about life on land. Nearly 1,980 meters below the surface, they discovered a tiny arthropod called Plutomurus ortobalagonensis. It's a species of springtail, a small insect-like creature. But this one was different. It had no eyes. It had no pigment in its body at all. Completely translucent because in a place with zero light, color and vision are simply wasted evolutionary energy. This little creature was living almost 2 kilometers underground, deeper than any other land animal had ever been found living and reproducing, not just surviving temporarily, but actually completing its life cycle down there in permanent darkness. Here's the part that should genuinely mess with how you think about life on this planet. That creature has no access to sunlight ever, no plants growing nearby to eat, no obvious food chain. Scientists believe these deep cave organisms survive off organic material that slowly filters down from the surface through cracks in the rocks, sometimes taking years, maybe even decades, to make that journey from sunlight down into the pitch black world where these animals live their entire lives. An entire functioning ecosystem sustained almost entirely on scraps of nutrients that trickle down like slow motion rain through solid stone. And that springtail wasn't alone down there. In the years since, researchers have documented dozens of other species living inside these deep cave systems, various types of blind beetles, pale spiders, and other tiny invertebrates, all sharing the same eerie traits: no eyes, no color, bodies built for a world that never sees light. Together, they form what scientists call a troglodytic ecosystem, a community of species that have become so specialized to permanent darkness that most of them could not survive if you brought them back up to the surface. Sunlight, to these creatures, would essentially be a hostile environment. That idea alone flips the usual story of survival on its head. We tend to think of the surface world with its sun and its plants and its open air as the normal baseline for life, and the underground as the hostile extreme. But for these particular species, it's the exact opposite. The cave is home. The surface is the deadly unknown. This discovery didn't just impress cavers, it caught the attention of astrobiologists, scientists who study the possibility of life beyond Earth. Because if complex animal life can survive nearly 2 kilometers underground in permanent darkness, permanent cold, and almost total isolation from the surface world, then the assumption that life needs direct sunlight and an open surface environment to survive gets a lot shakier. This is part of the exact same logic scientists use when they argue that life could theoretically survive underground on Mars or inside the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, in dark subsurface oceans that never see a single ray of light. Veryovkina and Cave aren't just deep holes in a mountain. They're one of the closest things we have on Earth to a natural laboratory for what alien life underground might actually look like. All right, before we go even deeper into this, literally, I want to ask you something. If a discovery like this, an eyeless creature living almost 2 kilometers underground, completely changes how scientists think about life surviving on other planets, what do you think we still haven't found down there? Drop your guess in the comments, because some of the theories from the caving and science community about what might still be undiscovered in these systems are genuinely wild. And I want to hear what you think before I tell you what the experts suspect. And if you're enjoying this descent so far, tap that like button. It actually helps this video reach more people who love this kind of deep, weird, real science content. Okay, let's keep going, because it gets even more intense from here. And none of this is possible without an enormous amount of specialized equipment. A single deep expedition into Veryovkina can require several kilometers of rope, hundreds of anchor bolts drilled directly into the rock to secure that rope at regular intervals, and enough food, batteries, and dry clothing to sustain a full team for weeks at a time, all of it carried in by hand, piece by piece, through passages too narrow for anything larger than a human body. Cavers move through the vertical sections using a technique called single rope technique, essentially climbing and descending the same fixed ropes over and over, day after day, using mechanical ascenders and descenders instead of ladders. Every single one of those thousands of meters of rope has to be checked, rechecked, and eventually hauled back out when the expedition is over, because leaving gear behind in a cave this remote is both an environmental problem and a safety hazard for the next team that comes through. Because reaching the deepest known points of these caves is not simply a matter of climbing down a hole. At certain depths, the passage is completely blocked by what cavers call a sump, a section of tunnel that is fully flooded with water, ceiling to floor, with zero air gap. To get past a sump, cave explorers have to switch from climbing gear into full technical scuba diving equipment, and then swim through completely flooded, pitch-black underwater tunnels, sometimes for significant distances, all while already exhausted from days of vertical descent and already more than a mile beneath the surface of the earth. Think about the layers of risk stacked on top of each other here. You are already in one of the most remote, hardest to reach places on the planet. If something goes wrong, rescue teams cannot simply run in and pull you out. They would have to descend the exact same multi-day vertical route you did, through the exact same narrow squeezes, the exact same freezing water, just to reach you. And now, on top of that logistical nightmare, cavers are asked to strap on scuba tanks and swim through submerged passages in zero visibility water, far past the point where a normal human being would ever choose to be underwater in the first place. Some cave diving experts consider this kind of deep cave sump diving to be more dangerous than most deep sea diving or ice diving expeditions, precisely because of how impossible fast rescue becomes at that depth underground. There is no helicopter that can reach you, no boat, no radio signal, just rope, cold water, and the people you walked in with. And here's a detail that adds a whole new layer to this story that most coverage of these caves completely leaves out. This isn't just an isolated hole punched into a mountain. Scientists have actually performed water tracing experiments in this region, injecting dye into water at certain points inside the cave system, and then watching where that same water eventually resurfaces. And what they found is remarkable. Water that enters this cave system underground eventually reappears kilometers away in coastal springs near the Black Sea. That means Veryovkina and Krubera aren't sealed off self-contained pits. They're part of a massive, still active underground river network that runs beneath an entire mountain range and is still actively carving and reshaping the rock today. The exact same slow, relentless process that created these caves in the first place, still happening right now while you're watching this video. There's also a piece of this story that almost nobody talks about, and it's not about biology or geology at all. It's about geopolitics. The Veryovkina Massif sits inside Abkhazia, a region that is internationally recognized as part of the country of Georgia, but has functioned as a breakaway, Russian-backed territory since a war in the early 1990s. That political tension is a huge part of why it has historically been Russian and Ukrainian caving teams, not Western expeditions, that have dominated the exploration of this region for decades. Access, permits, and logistics in this area are complicated in ways that have almost nothing to do with the cave itself and everything to do with the fragile, contested politics of the region above it. It's a strange thought that one of the most extreme scientific frontiers on the surface of our own planet sits inside a territory most people couldn't find on a map, let alone explain the politics of. And here's maybe the most important thing to understand about all of this. As far as the scientific and caving community is concerned, Veryovkina is not treated as the final word. It's not the finish line. Explorers, including well-known American caver Bill Stone, have spent decades pushing into Mexico's Chive cave system, a massive, still only partially explored network that many in the caving world believe could eventually surpass Veryovkina's depth, once fully connected through its own flooded sumps and unexplored passages. Nobody in this field believes we have found the true limit of how deep a cave on this planet can go. Every year, expeditions push a little further, map a little more, and the record has already changed hands multiple times within the same tiny mountain range in just the last 20 years. The honest answer to how deep does the Earth go is still quite literally unknown. So here's what I think is genuinely wild to sit with. We have mapped the surface of Mars in more complete detail than we have mapped the inside of our own planet. We've sent cameras to the edge of the solar system, but there are cave systems less than a day's flight from major cities that still have unexplored passages nobody has ever set foot in. Modern cavers now use laser scanning and specialized underground mapping tools to build three-dimensional models of these systems as they explore them. And even with that technology, new branches and unexplored side passages keep turning up almost every expedition. The map of Veryovkina you'd see today is not the same map cavers were working with even 5 years ago. and it almost certainly won't be the final version either. Every single year, cavers armed with nothing but rope, headlamps, and scuba gear push a little further into places like Veryovkina. And every single year, there's a real chance they find something down there that changes what we understand about biology, about geology, or about the limits of what life can survive. An eyeless, colorless creature living almost 2 kilometers underground wasn't a headline scientists expected to write, and yet there it was, quietly living its entire life in the one place on Earth that seems designed to make life impossible. If this kind of deep, strange, real science is your thing, this channel is exactly where you want to be, because we go looking for exactly this kind of story, the places, the discoveries, and the facts that don't usually make it into mainstream coverage. Subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next descent, and drop a comment telling me where you think we should go next. The deepest ocean trench, the most remote glacier, or maybe even further underground than this. Thanks for coming down into the dark with me today. I'll see you on the next one.